It is a well-known fact that being part of any country's military is a challenging career, but ever since Nick Montez was young, he aspired to be part of the United States Marines. While he was prepared for all the physical and mental challenges of the role, he had no idea that he would end up forming strong bonds not just with his human colleagues, but also the canine ones. Yes, Montez had the opportunity to work with a yellow Labrador retriever named Mally while on tour in Afghanistan, and what was meant to be a few weeks together turned into a lifelong bond Nick spent years fighting for. Keep watching to find out how a straightforward call forever changed the Marines and Mally's lives. As we already mentioned, Montez and Mally met in Afghanistan. Nick didn't have any dogs growing up, so when he was assigned to the Marine Corps Dog Handler program, the young man didn't know what to expect. It turned out that he was a natural and completed the program with flying colors. His first job had him paired with Mally, who had gone through his training to learn how to sniff out bombs. During the program, Nick has instructed time and time again not to work on any deep attachments with the canines that he was going to work with. But of course, even from their first meeting, it was clear that Mally adored Nick. The two were deployed to Garmsur, Afghanistan, where they worked together for a year, with Mally sniffing the ground for improvised explosive devices, IEDs. A dangerous job, but one which saved countless lives. During this time, Nick struggled with homesickness and the cruel reality of war. The Marine credits that if it hadn't been for Mally, he might not have made it through this challenging time. Thankfully, Nick and Mally survived their tour in Afghanistan, and the duo, with their bond strengthened even more, were assigned to return to the United States. Nick was beyond grateful that he and his canine partner went to a new location together. Nick didn't know that in the United States, the duo would have to face a harsh and abrupt goodbye. The Marine with his dog was sent to the Cherry Point, North Carolina Air Station, and the minute Nick touched down, Mally was instantly carried away to be taken to his next mission while the Marine was assigned to stay in the States. So Nick didn't even have time to say a proper goodbye to his well-loved companion. Nick frantically asked for any news on where Mally was being taken, but he wasn't allowed any new information. It was only in 2013 that Nick was honorably discharged from service that he finally found out where Mally was. His canine coworker was sent to work on the Lackland Air Force Base in Texas, and despite not being part of the Marines anymore, Nick used all his connections to learn about the well-being of the Labrador. Years had already passed since Nick and Mally had seen each other, but not a day went by when the ex-Marine didn't think about his buddy who helped him survive Afghanistan. He even filled out adoption papers for Mally with the Department of Defense. Nick knew he couldn't adopt Mally while still working for the military, but knew that once the dog retired, he would have a real chance of giving Mally a natural, safe home. So the ex-Marine decided to keep tabs on the canine, but of course he couldn't get any precise details for security reasons. It was even more complicated when an enormous corporation bought out the training company he went through at the beginning of his service with Mally. The ex-Marine called anyone and everyone to find out how Mally was. At that point, he didn't even care about the adoption process and worried more about her well-being. This was also when Nick promised himself that if Mally were okay, he would take things to the next level to get her out of the military service. After months of no information, finally, a friend of a friend called Nick to inform him that Mally was stationed at Lackland Air Force Base in Texas. While she was safe and well, sadly, she was not retiring anytime soon. Nick was relieved beyond words that his faithful companion was safe and away from active duty, and what was even better was that Nick had a close friend who was working on the base, Derek Brown. And when Nick called Brown and recounted his tale in connection with Mally, his old friend completely understood why the ex-Marine was determined to have Mally back in his life. While he also told Nick that adopting Mally would be years away, he did agree to do something significant for him. Sadly, Nick's request to come to the base to see Mally was not approved, but at least the ex-Marine had more information about her than ever. His friend Derek tried to persuade Nick to let go of their bond and reiterated that Mally was still years away from retiring, but the young man was unmoved. And to stop explaining himself every time and show his dedication to his old partner, Nick decided to get a tattoo dedicated to Mally. Located on the back of his calf, Nick got a tattoo of a dog paw print with Mally's name and her identification number, R798. The Labrador also had the same sequence tattooed behind her ear. While Nick repeatedly tried to get Derek to arrange a meeting with Mally, the officers in charge never allowed it. They thought reconnecting with Nick would come in between Mally performing her duties. The months of wait soon turned into years, and while he missed Mally dearly, Nick was grateful for Derek, who would routinely give him updates about the Labrador's life. Finally, it seemed like she was safe and healthy, but all of a sudden, his updates stopped. Nick immediately started panicking, thinking that Mally had been injured in combat. He called several people at the base, but no one would pick up his calls. By then, everyone was well aware of Nick and his desire to adopt Mally, and the fact that nobody was getting in touch with him regarding the Labrador sent him into a frenzy. Finally, after years of patience, Nick thought that maybe this was all in vain. Everyone around Nick knew about his love for Mally, including his friend Don Durgan, who also served in the Marines. Don saw how broken up Nick was and decided to take action. He had watched for years how the ex-Marine savored any updates about Mally, and this lack of contact was ruining Nick's mental health. Even if the Labrador was gone, his friend deserved an update. Unfortunately, early nobody in the base cared enough to talk to Nick, so Don decided to take things into his own hands. He connected with U.S. Senator Mike Crapo and explained Nick's situation and how he wanted nothing more than to adopt his former canine partner. This was a complete shot in the dark, but it paid off immensely. Senator Crapo was moved by the story and called back immediately. The senator also promised to make a few calls to ensure Nick got an update about Mally. The ex-Marine was beyond grateful for this kind gesture from the senator and his friend. Within 12 hours of taking it to the senator, Nick received a call from the Air Force Base, and it wasn't just an afterthought. He got the call from the colonel stationed at Lackland Air Force Base, who apologized for the lack of communication, even calling Nick by his first name. The colonel reassured Nick that Mally was well and gave him the news he had been waiting decades for. Mally was ready to retire and could be adopted by Nick. Just hearing these words sent the ex-Marine's head spinning with happiness. Could this finally be happening? After years of waiting to see Mally again, Nick was finally going to be able to adopt the Labrador and give her the home she deserved. Thanks to Don reaching the senator, the adoption process was expedited, and Nick's adoption was approved the day Mally retired. Nick was beyond grateful that finally Mally could live life as an average dog where she wouldn't have to put her life at risk for others. Nick's long battle for Mally had become local news, and the community stood by the ex-Marine and even started sending him donations to help give Mally the pampered life she deserved. Nick traveled from Idaho to Texas to get Mally from the airbase. After years apart, the duo was finally reunited, hopefully forever. However, Nick was worried that Mally might have forgotten about him after all this time. But he was wrong. Mally greeted him with all the love he remembered they shared, and it felt like no time had passed between them. And while the duo shared a private moment, people lined outside with sweet messages and American flags, waving to give Mally the soldier's welcome she deserved.